This is Dr. Brainard, and she's the author of Esther's Song.
Hello, I'm here to talk about the backstory to Esther's Song. So what happened to get me to the place where I actually wrote the book, and then the joy of writing it. My goal as a writer is to bring the Hebrew scriptures to life, one book at a time. Most people know the biblical story of Esther, the Jewish orphan, who navigated the lethal quarters of a Persian harem and withstood palace intrigue. She also overcame religious persecution and ended up marrying King Xerxes and saving her people from extermination. And we still celebrate the Feast of Purim, even today, in honor of she and Mordecai, her cousins, her adopted father's project to save the Jews. I became fascinated with learning more about the orphan Hadassah, which was her Jewish name before she was changed her name to Esther, who became a queen, and thought about that other people would like to know about that as well. The story behind the writing of this historical fiction, Esther's Song, began with my translating the Hebrew Bible. So from the Hebrew into English, word by word. I then started to read everything I could about the Persian Empire, including the court tales written by the Greek historian Herodias in his book, The Histories, which is a fascinating account of 5th century BC of the rise of the Persian Empire and some of the most intriguing stories about what went on in the harem of other places. Things were going really good as I did my study for writing this book, but there was this problem. Whatever the English word was for people's names, it was all these transliterated, which means you take the letters from another language and you put them into English, and how do you keep the players straight? I mean, there was all these names. They were from Old Persian, Elamite, Akkadian, Aramaic, Hebrew, and Greek. And so I said, okay, I couldn't tell if they were talking about the same person or different people because the names were so different. So I started to make charts, lots of charts of their positions, and then to discover if that was the same person, and then charts of the chronology of all these people that could potentially be in the book of Esther. And that was a great help. I finally just took one that was the most attested of how to spell it and who the people were, and that was great. And part of that research is when I hit pay dirt about knowing I could write something new about the book of Esther, the biblical book of Esther. And that was when I discovered that Esther's husband, King Xerxes, was the eldest son of King Darius and Queen Atassa. And when I realized that Queen Atassa was the daughter of Cyrus, the founder of the Persian Empire, and that she was still alive in the book of Esther, and she had been there in the whole Persian Empire at that point, I knew that I had a story. I also knew from the biblical account that the Queen Mother was called when there was the handwriting, that she was over the harem there. And so that in Persia, the harem would have been overseen by the mother of the king. So here is the most powerful person in the harem, and she was Cyrus's daughter. And I was like, yes, this is good. And I also was able to attest that from the biblical story refers to the Queen Mother, whose name I now knew was Atassa. And there's a wonderful book, and on your handouts is a list of some of the books I used. But this one, Women in Ancient Persia, by Marcia Brasius, confirmed that Atassa was the daughter of the founder of the Persian Empire, was married to not only to Darius, the father of Xerxes, but to her brother Cambyses before that, but he died unexpectedly, and her cousin Darius took the throne, and she ended up marrying him after Cambyses. Now I knew I had something to tell different about the book of Esther. I could actually be in that story by knowing that there was someone who could help me fill in the blanks. And so as a writer of historical fiction, I felt my responsibility was to sympathetically imagine the life of Esther as it would have been to be taken as a young girl, probably in her early, or before she's a teenager, probably by 12, and to imagine what life would be there. The biblical story covers 12 years, and she's actually in the harem for 5 years before she goes into Xerxes, because Xerxes is off fighting the wars with the Greeks over in Athens, in the Greek area. So he's gone, and when he comes back, then we have the story of her going into the harem, or into the king, and then moving into another part of the harem. So I wanted to look at all the different, so as I did my research, I looked at all the sociological, geographical, technical pieces, so that in the book, Esther's Song, whenever I talk about clothing, I've used somebody who could tell me about the fabrics, what kind of clothing was available in that period of time. And it's amazing what you can find. The lady who writes about that kind of information actually graduated from Oregon State University and was probably her dissertation, and then she made it into a book, and that's on your handout as well. So it was interesting. So I tried to get every piece of information I could related to the story, but the Persians were great recorders. We have tons of information from them. When Alexander the Great took Persepolis, their new capital, he burnt it to the ground in retribution for them destroying Athens. And so those tablets that would have been clay tablets were not just fired, but they were fired they burnt the whole city. And that allowed us to have many, many pieces of information. So whenever you're doing historical fiction, especially 5th century BC, you are at the mercy of someone recording it, then it being found, and then so someone actually writing it about what you want to know about, and then it somehow getting lost or being in the ground, and then an archaeologist picks someone who actually finds it, and then you have to have someone who actually can translate what it is they found, which some of those translators are absolutely amazing. So I was able to do this, but it's almost impossible to get the daily lives of kings and princes, much less anything about women and children. So you just have to take little pieces of information to write historical fiction to weave a story together. It's often challenging. But then I had done so much research, I was ready to write the book. And I had charts everywhere, graphs everywhere. And so I started writing, and I was between jobs at that time, and so I had actually a year to write the book. And I did write it in that year. I worked at it just like a regular job, got up. I was used to working 8 to 5, so I worked 8 to 5, at least 5 days a week. And I wrote the first draft of the Book of Esther. But I would be drained trying to put all this stuff together. But what no one really told me was that at night, these characters started coming to me. They would tell me, "Hey, lady, you haven't given me enough face time here. I'm important. You haven't written about me for days or weeks, What about me?" Another one would say, "Whoa. I'm a major player here. You should have made me somebody special." And not so much in Esther, but in the next book I'm writing about Daniel, the book of Daniel, I have one character who started out just as a nobody, and now he's one of the major voices, because these characters won't let you go. And they will just literally, if you let them, I said at the computer, and they will tell you their stories. And it'll flow. You let them talk their words. They will tell you what it is they want you to write and how to write it, and if you're lucky, you'll enjoy that. But I've just found a real joy of letting them do that. And mostly I discovered that during this process that I love the whole process of bringing the Hebrew Scriptures to life to 21st century readers. Does anybody have any questions? Yes?
Your research, you said you talked to people, but percentage-wise, was it person to person, or was it a lot more reading?
There's mainly reading of archaeological accounts, and on the handouts, there's a list of some of the some of the references that I used. I liked a lot of those are written by the archaeologist that actually discovered Persian artifacts. I have a master's in biblical studies, and my Hebrew advisor, or my advisor, was the NIV Pentateuch specialist for the New International Version. So I had a lot of people who have significant experience, and I've done a tremendous amount. But it's very hard to find anybody who, there's no first-person accounts from that long ago.
Okay. Yeah.
But Herodias is the closest thing. If you haven't read Herodias the Histories, if you're at all interested in ancient Near East history, and just, I don't know, I'm on here, but actually right now the Halliford Museum is having a special on the ancient Near East. They have an exhibit. The exhibit is on there right now. My friend here has just been there, and they're having lecture series almost every week, basically some lecture series until December 22nd. So if you're from around here, you can hear. I went to the Babylon one last week, and that archaeologist had written a book, Return to Babylon. So there's lots of archaeological things, but as to, there's no historical record of Esther as being the queen, but we do know that Xerxes' wife, a mistress that was put away, she does not disappear. She stays in the harem. Her son would have been, if Esther was about 12 when she went in, which is probably somewhere hopefully close, then Artaxerxes, Xerxes and Amestris's son, was born right when Esther was in the harem. And I have her actually go in to a party celebrating this new prince's birth because she's in the harem. She's not going anywhere. Any woman who carries and has the king's children is never allowed out of a harem, because they cannot be having competition for people to be princes and therefore kings. So she's there, and she actually, Artaxerxes, becomes the king that is on the throne. If you read the biblical account of Ezra and Nehemiah, and if you know the book of Nehemiah, where he goes into the king to ask permission to go back to help build the wall for Jerusalem, that's King Artaxerxes. That is the prince that was born in the time when Esther would have been in the harem. So it's very interesting. And the book of Daniel takes place in Babylon, which becomes under Persian rule. And Esther came from Babylon. Mordecai was somehow transferred to Susa, where the book takes place. So there's actually a lot of information even in the Bible, but you have to really dig it out to get the connection of those books. They're called post-exilic books. Anyway.
Is Artaxerxes also called Xerxes?
Artaxerxes is the son. So Xerxes is Esther's husband. He is called Ahasuerus, which is the Persian, the English transliteration of the Persian name in the Greek, I believe. And so you have the Greek translation, what the Persian name would be, and then traditionally it's assumed that he was Xerxes, because it's the chronological of the book because it's dated. It's pretty probably. I mean, you can't know for absolute sure any of these things, but they did date. So, and there were other brothers that two before him, but they somehow mysteriously die. And well, I won't tell you the end of the book, but somehow they die, and so Artaxerxes becomes. So Atassa then becomes queen mother and becomes in charge of the harem. And so I won't give away the end of the book. But any other questions? Yes.
What is the Persian name for Xerxes? Is it Hashayasha?
I think, yeah.
Hashayasha.
Yeah.
I'm Persian.
Yes, then you should be up here doing this.
But I just wanted to know.
I'm not sure, but it would be the Persian word. And Ahasuerus, I think, is the Greek transliteration. I mean, that's why the names become, I just had to make charts of them. And if you look in a good encyclopedia, biblical encyclopedia or theological encyclopedia, they will give all of the names, which is tremendously helpful. That was what really got me so that I could keep these players straight. Because historical fiction, some people consider historical fiction, if you like to write, be careful here, romance or something, where you just simply have two people in some period and you have a little bit of kind of like the, you know, the stage setting. But if you really write historical fiction, you need to really be in those people's lives and know all of the history and the people around them, and who, in the book of Esther, many of the people we know are historical people, because that the one book about women in Persia, but there's lots of other books that talk about, sometimes it's only about their role and we don't know their names. So in the Bible book we have Esther having 7 maids. Well, I had to give them some names, but I made them from different countries and different places, and there had to have been lots of girls that came in. So I have some of the other girls. I decided about 30. I didn't know how many would really be there. So I made some, and I made an Egyptian girl and gave her a name. And anyway, so you have to make up characters to fill in the plot, but the main ones, the kings and the queens and the advisors and the people, we can actually find out about some of those people.
I don't know. I never heard the name Esther. And even I had heard in Iran. I left Iran more than 50 years ago. I've forgotten it. So I don't know what Esther is in Persian. Do you know?
My star,
My star.
I think. Star. Hadassah, her Hebrew name is from the myrtle, but I think it's star. But again, that may be the Greek translation from the Persian. Didn't bring my notes for all that. But so have you ever been to where ancient Susa was?
Oh, yeah, I lived there. For a
You lived there? Okay. This is to answer your question over there. Did you ever talk to
I
anyone?
didn't live there, but my job was very close. So more or less I lived there. We had a project there, so I would go and stay overnight for a week or 2 or 3.
Now he's here to tell me how wonderful. Yes. Is there still a river there?
What?
A river?
A river, yes.
It's still there?
Susa.
Yes. I have the river there. I have, and it's the tell itself is still there? Yes.
Daniel's there.
I'm right. The next book is about Daniel.
Yeah.
And
It's in the state of New-
I wish the country would be
I vaguely remember this thing. I was very young there. So
Yeah.
but I remember I went and visited Daniel's
well,
grave.
Daniel in Hebrew is God is my judge. So I'm better in Hebrew than your Persian, but how fascinating that you were there. Yeah. Daniel, in the book of Daniel in the Bible, talks about that he goes to Susa, has a vision, and we don't know if he went there in physical or not, but in my next book I have him going to Susa, so I may need your information here because, yay. Any other questions?
Are you already writing this next book?
I'm on the last, the book is finished, I'm on the last edit, I hope. I hope it'll be published the 1st of next year. Yeah, it's called Babylon, Center of the World, because for the Babylonians, Babylon was the center of the world. And it'll be about Daniel coming as a hostage, and he lives over 70 years, and we know he's there till he's at least in his late 80s. So, and he lives also when I realized I had somebody who was alive, in that case, it was Nebuchadnezzar's daughter, but she's alive, and no indication she's died. And then Ezekiel is apparently still there, and I'm having a lot of fun in the ancient Near East. So if you enjoy the ancient Near East, I think, and even if you've read the biblical book of Esther, I think most of the people are telling me they are learning so much more about what is there. I thank you for your time, and it's been my privilege to talk.